I'm here today to talk about breaking the interspecies understanding barrier. That is, can we learn how to understand the languages of dolphins, whales, orangutans, tool-using crows? And of course, the goal isn't just to do the science, but to transform our relationship with the rest of nature, right? When people go from being out there speaking a language you don't understand, and when you get to know them and speak their language, they go from out there to in your heart. You have to treat them differently. And the same thing with nature. As we learn that animals have had rich communication systems that we can understand, they go from a thing that's out there to something that's in our hearts. And that changes us in the process. So let's play a guessing game. Does anyone know what animal communicates this way, makes this sound? Any guesses? Dolphin? No, it's not a dolphin. Any others? It is a kind of whale. These are beluga communicating. And to me, this sounds like an alien modem, right? This is a couple of belugas communicating back and forth. And actually, it's very interesting. We hear up to 20 kilohertz. They're communicating all the way up to 120 kilohertz. And the question you should first ask is like, well, why are they communicating at high frequency? High frequencies don't go very far in water. And the answer is because of this. They actually are communicating on top of each other, sometimes touching. And what's already known is that they have names that they call each other by. One of their sister species, sperm whales, they have, they pronounce their clan identity when they say hellos. And the thing that blew my mind when I learned, working with Dr. Valeria Vergara, who is the preeminent expert working with belugas, is that even though she has tags that sit on the whales, whaleables, that they only are able to look at 3% of the data. So this is where your ears should perk up, because here's one of the most vocal underwater species with the greatest vocabulary, and science has not looked at 97% of their communication. Right? This is the next frontier. This is what I think of as the most humble graph. Why most humble? Because it only includes all of time and all of space. But when you think about it, the human experience is so incredibly small compared to all that is. And our ability to understand is limited by our ability to perceive. And what does AI do? It throws open the aperture of that which we can perceive. So our research is starting to show. We're just working with tool-using crows that have a unique family structure where they raise their chicks together. Normally, crows raise them as parents, just mother, one father. Here, it's like many families come together. They have a unique dialect, unique vocabulary. They take outside adults in, teach them that dialect, and then they learn that new vocabulary and learn the new family structure. What we're discovering is that a whole bunch of their communication has never been seen by scientists and have never been published on. And it's not a small amount. It's 70% of crow communication turns out to be whispers that they say while they fly. It's sort of incredible, actually, that the more we look around the world, the more we realize we do not know what we do not know. Turns out parents spend the first week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of their chick's life leaned over the chick, whispering a unique name that they will use for the rest of their life. And while I'm here to talk about animal communication, just to really show the point, do you think that plants can hear? In 2019, there was a study where they played different sounds to flowers, a primrose flower, and only when they played the sound of an approaching bee did the flowers respond by producing more and sweeter nectar. That is to say, the flower heard the bee approaching and got excited. Okay, so I think shown that there's rich communication, but is there really a there? Is there really language? And while we do not know yet, we are starting to get huge hints that the answer is yes. This was one of my favorite studies from 1994, University of Hawaii, and here they taught dolphins 2 gestures. The first gesture was do something you've never done before. Right? That is to say, innovate. And to do that, the dolphins have to remember everything that they've done before, understand the concept of negation, not one of those things, and then produce something whole cloth. But they can innovate. Then they teach the dolphin another gesture, do something together. And they'll say to 2 different dolphins, do something you've never done before, together. Innovate, together. And the dolphins go down, exchange sonic information, come up, and do the exact same thing at the same time that they've never done before. So while that doesn't prove representational language, it sort of puts the burden of proof on the other side. But then the question becomes, well, how would you possibly translate a language without a Rosetta Stone when you don't have any examples? And I want to show you all sort of how AI sees, to give you an intuition for how AI works. This is actually how AI sees English. So this is the top 10,000 most spoken words. In this galaxy, every star is a word. Words that mean similar things are near each other. Words that share relationship share a distance and direction, a geometry. So king is to man as woman is to queen. So in this shape, king is the same distance and direction to man as woman is to queen. When you ask the AI how to build this shape, well, it starts to look like this. Imagine there's a point which is dog. There's words for friend, guardian, man, wolf, fur, yelp, howl. Those set of relationships fixes that point in space. And when you solve the massive multidimensional Sudoku puzzle of every concept to every other concept, out pops this rigid structure that represents a language. And then this was the insight in 2017. Computer scientists asked, well, how similar are the shapes of language? Is the shape of Spanish similar to English, similar to Arabic? You couldn't possibly just take the 2 shapes and line them up and use that to translate. But when they tried, that's indeed exactly what worked. That the shape of Spanish and the shape of English, even though they're a little bit different, if you sort of blur your eyes, the point which is dog ends up the same in both. And that's not just true of Spanish and English, but Arabic and Aramaic and Urdu and Esperanto. Every language, every human language appears to share a kind of universal human meaning shape. And to me, this is so profound, because in a time of such deep division, technology is showing us that there's a hidden underlying structure that unites us all. I just want to point out, this isn't just true for languages. It goes much deeper than this. So everyone, I'm sure, has used Dolly or any of the other Nano Banana, where you type in language and you get an image that's never existed before. How does that work? Well, this is how it works. You ask AI to build this shape that represents the internal relationships of language. You ask it to build the shape that represents the internal shape of images, the relationships. You then use image caption pairs to align these 2 shapes. And now you can translate between language and image. Portrait of Chile as a person is this point in language space, which points to this point in image space, and that's the image. That's how it works behind the scenes. This, by the way, was my face when I learned how all this worked. And it's not just language and image. Everything can be treated as a kind of language. Robotics is a sequence of motions. It's a language. That's why robotics is suddenly moving so quickly. Videos are a sequence. They're a language. DNA is a language. We are learning how to translate to and from every possible language of nature, and that's how we know now that everything that can be translated will be translated. That is, this is no longer a matter of, is it possible to translate animal communication, but when will we translate animal communication? So hopefully now I've sort of demonstrated how we might translate. I've demonstrated that there really might be language. But the question is, okay, so maybe they're communicating, but they're just talking about but where's the fish? How deep could it possibly go? There's something called the mirror test. This is where you take an animal, you paint a dot on the animal, they look in a mirror, and if they start trying to investigate the dot, well, you know that they're connecting that there in the image, in the mirror, that image, that's me. That's self-awareness. These are dolphins looking into mirrors. So you can see they open their mouths, they're trying to investigate themselves, and they're having possibly the most universal mammal experience, which is you look in the mirror and you check out your abs. It turns out, by the way, that a couple species pass the mirror test, have clear self-awareness, including elephants, but researchers didn't know that elephants passed the mirror test for a long time until they realized that they were using small mirrors, which to me is like so very human. So when animals communicate, they may well be communicating about one of the most profound aspects of our experience, that of self-awareness, of consciousness. And this was the founding thought behind our project, Interspecies, which was, can we build these shapes for animals? Can we build these shapes for humans? Can we match the shapes together to do translation? And remember, the parts that match, that'll give us direct translations. The parts that don't match, whales and dolphins have been passing down culture for 34 million years. Culture, dialect, languages. Whatever it is that is the solution to humanity's problems, I'd argue it's not in our imagination, because if it was, we'd be doing it. So we are looking for things outside the sphere of human imagination. Where better to look than in the wisdom of cultures that are 85 times longer than our species? So, at Interspecies, we are pioneering animal language processing, sort of like natural language processing for animals, building frontier AI for the rest of nature. We're already demonstrating, actually, that when you train models on humans first and then move them to animals, they do much better. So it's starting to prove out the fundamental hypothesis. And we're already seeing that these models are accelerating science. They're saving scientists that we work with up to 3 months of doing their work, accelerating across the entire tree of life. That's sort of the side effect, is you need a scientific revolution to drive the Copernican revolution. And the thing that we're seeing is just like when the Hubble telescope was pointed at an empty patch in sky, and what it discovered was not nothing, but everything. That when we are building the new scientific tool and pointing it at a place that science thought was empty, rich animal communication and language, that what we're discovering is not nothing, but actually more than we could possibly imagine. The goal, though, isn't just the science. The goal is a fundamental shift in the relationship with humanity to itself and the rest of nature. And so there is an incredible album called The Songs of the Humpback Whale. It was the first time that the global community heard whales sing. And that album went on Voyager 1 to represent humanity just after on the Golden Record, just after Human Greetings, gets played in front of the General UN Assembly, and becomes the reason that we banned deep-sea whaling. These shifts in perspective really can change almost everything. And I want to leave you all with another thought, which is that AI, almost all of it, ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, Gemini, they're all trained on human data. They are about modeling and extending human intelligence. But that's only half of all of the intelligence we have access to, probably less. We also need to be working on extending nature's intelligence. I've been very inspired here as I've learned about the concept of umana, the idea, as far as I understand, the North Star of being able to play the infinite game on a finite planet, to treat the land we live on as borrowed from our children and them borrowing it from our grandchildren. And I'd argue that despite all of the brilliance of our species, we have not yet figured out how to actually play the infinite game on a finite planet. But ecosystems have. And so before we get to AGI and superintelligence and AI recapitulates all the problems that humans have created, it seems critical that we learn how to have AI think in the styles of ecosystem and nature. If AI trained on human intelligence can do everything that we're seeing, imagine how much more rich and what we might learn, the wisdom of being able to model and extend and have AI extend nature's intelligence. You know, it turns out that humpbacks, just return to this for a second, their songs go viral. Australian humpbacks, for whatever reason, are sort of like the K-pop singers. And whatever they sing within a couple seasons often are sung across the entire world. And this speaks to the ethical responsibility of what happens when we start breaking the interspecies understanding barrier in the next 4 years. Because if we just make a synthetic whale that sings, we might disrupt a 34 million year old culture. You know, create viral memes. We probably shouldn't do that. And that means, to propose something, we are going to start needing the Ministry for Interspecies Diplomacy. We're going to need the prime directives. How do we interact with the other cultures and species of Earth as we begin to understand them? So, for everyone that's interested in following along, please, this will give you direct access to an email. We're in the middle of we're a nonprofit. We're in the middle of an $80 million nonprofit fundraise led by Reid Hoffman and Steve Jurvetson. If you're interested in helping think about the kinds of Geneva Convention for cross-species communication that we're going to need, what happens when we learn the wisdom of the other cultures and species of Earth, please let me know. I'll just finally end with this from the late and incredible Jane Goodall when she was talking about Earth species. Ever since I was a child, I've dreamed of understanding what animals are saying. How wonderful that is now a real possibility. The invention of the telescope was an incredible moment in humanity's history because it let us look out at the patterns of the universe, and what did we discover? We discovered that Earth was not the center. This time, powered by AI, our new tools are going to let us look out at the patterns of the universe, and what are we going to discover? That humanity is not the center. And that is the fundamental shift I think we need for all of us to thrive. So, thank you so much.